Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. Today, we have Michael FitzGerald. So, maybe you remember a few episodes ago, we had James FitzGerald on the podcast. This is his brother, quite the duo. So, Michael FitzGerald, if I had to sum it up, genius programmer, and so that's pretty much what this episode is about. He trains a lot of CrossFit Games athletes, does a lot of individualized programming. He is a numbers and data nerd just like me, and so to be honest, that's pretty much what this episode is about. We just talk programming, CrossFit, and all sorts of different stuff, and of course, he answers the questions on what he thinks it takes to become a better human and the Quickfire Questions. So make sure you listen to this one. But before that, guys, I wanted to say, make sure that you head on over to endof3fitness.com. So that's all spelled out, endof3fitness.com. There's a little green button as soon as you hit that page, and you're going to click that green button, and you're going to enter your email and your name, and you are going to get all sorts of cool stuff. So what you actually get when you do this, you get a program we call our 7-day barbell in-doc program. And so you get access to our membership site. You're going to get access to this programming so you can see what our training looks like and actually participate in it. It actually comes with a full video library so you know how to do the exercises. There's a video for every single day of the training with me on camera explaining what you need to do and how you need to do it. And you also get a lot of other cool stuff. You get announcements when these podcasts comes out. You also get an ebook, the One Barbell System ebook, and you even get an invitation to our training if that's something you want to be a part of. And so any new programs we have coming out, any new promotions we're doing, any new articles, any new podcast episodes, that is the place to start right there, guys. If you want to be in the loop of everything Into 3 Fitness, I get feedback a lot of times like, hey, I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know that was going on. It's like, dude, we send all that stuff out via email, and we hook you up with some mega bonuses if you sign up, like our 7-day barbell in-doc program, ebooks, and all sorts of stuff. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Go to into3fitness.com, enter your email, get a bunch of free stuff, and kind of be on the inside of what we're doing here, guys. All right, enough chit-chat. Let's get to the interview. Here is Michael FitzGerald. All right, Michael, I'm super pumped to have you on the Better Humanology podcast, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, man. So we like to challenge. We're challenging our guests to challenge our listeners. Is the best way to put it. And we like to give the listeners a fitness challenge, mental toughness challenge, and book recommendation right at the beginning of every podcast. Would you be comfortable maybe starting us off with a fitness challenge today?
Sure. Interesting fitness challenge we've used a few times on our clients, which is a good retest for some people, is you row 100 meters as fast as you possibly can every minute for 10 minutes. And what you're looking for is your fastest time, your slowest time, your average times. And it's a good retest to do probably 6 months to a year later.
Okay, awesome. And how about a mental toughness challenge?
Example of a mental toughness challenge could be, let's just say you create some type of, or you have your coach or your friend create some type of workout for you, maybe some chipper style thing, but they know what the event is, and they kind of just tell you one piece at a time. So let's just say there's 10 pieces of the workout, like 15, 20 reps of each, or whatever however it's going to be. But you only know one section at a time. So let's say the first 3 sections are thrusters, rowing, and double unders. You, the athlete, are only told how many thrusters you got to do and what weight, and then the coach will just continuously set things up for you as you go along. So you don't really know what you're doing, but you have to work within yourself and know yourself, and then you also have to stay relaxed and confident because you do not know what's coming ahead. It's just a good little mental task. It's not really a good test. It's a good mental task.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that mental side is often overlooked. So I do have a question. So have you used that before in your training and programming?
Yep.
Okay, and I wonder, because my knee-jerk reaction on this is, one, it's absolutely awesome because you don't know, if you're the athlete, you don't know how much is coming, so you don't really know how to pace yourself. But do you find that someone, they tend to go, maybe push themselves a little bit harder and then maybe wish they hadn't because more keeps coming? Or do you feel like they stay super reserved out of the fear of the unknown?
That's a good question. I think like the top level, you're the really, really fit individuals, whatever you want to refer to that as. I think they're going to be comfortable going really hard, no matter what the task is, because they're also going to be very comfortable recovering from whatever the task is for what's coming next. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue for them. Where you would see like cautiousness would be with people like myself. When you're going to be a little worried about what comes next if you go a little too hard on this section. Whereas for the people that are very good, I don't think you're going to see as much cautiousness with them.
Okay, awesome. And how about a book recommendation?
Well, along those same lines, one of my favorite books I've listened to. I didn't read it. I listened to it probably 5 times in the last year was by Matt FitzGerald, not related. It's called How Bad Do You Want It? It's a great book.
Okay. Great. And what's your favorite part about that book?
It's literally what the title says. It's basically around what is going to limit human performance at maximal efforts in basically endurance type activities or semi-endurance type activities, where he says, or the contention is that anything beyond like 30 seconds is that you're solely limited by your head and nothing else. And that's like a very general way to explain it, but that's the way they talk about it, is that it's going to always come down to how much pain are you willing to go through. All
right. Yeah. And I like that. I can actually I'm just thinking about it a little bit. Anything greater than 30 seconds. Yeah. I see that. All right, man. It's pretty good. All right, man. I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to check out that book. And thank you for all the challenges, really. Now let's focus on you a little bit. Maybe you can give the listeners a little bit more about your background, what you're doing today, and all that good stuff, how you got into what you're doing now.
Yeah, no problem. So currently I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is Western Canada, just north of Montana for American listeners. I'm 30 years old. I was born in Eastern Canada, and I grew up there. I went to university there. In university, I studied exercise physiology or kinesiology, whatever you want to call it. I did an honors degree, and it was actually related to like how to best prepare or warm up for powerful events, and that was quite the learning experience. But that was also a good experience for me because it taught me that I did not want to continue in academia. I didn't want to go on to graduate school or anything like that. I was much more interested in fitness and just generally in fitness. And some of your listeners or yourself might know my brother, James FitzGerald. He's the owner of OPEX. So when I was in university, he was the person that kind of mentored me into fitness and taught me or kind of coached me as to where to go and what to learn. He's the one that really got me interested in fitness. And so I owe that to him for sure. And he was the person that hired me. So that's why I moved from Eastern Canada out to Calgary, because that's where he used to previously live. And I've been here in Calgary for 9 years now, or almost 9 years. And I've been working full-time as a fitness coach for that entire time with no other job besides helping people get fitter.
That's awesome, man. And I have to ask, because of what you were talking about in your when you were getting your degree, what is the best way to warm up for, you said, power sports?
Yeah, well, my research project was, where my research project was basically a 10-second bike sprint, and what we were measuring was peak and average time to peak power, and average power for the 10 seconds. And we just had 2 different protocols. We had a standard warm-up for that protocol, being like the person would literally just bike for 5 minutes at an easy pace, and then they would then rest for like 5 minutes, and then they would do the 10-second bike sprint as hard as possible on a Monarch bike. And then the other people would do like this leg press protocol. Like they just do like 3 tough reps every 2 minutes for 5 sets. And the idea was just to assess what the if there would be any what would be considered post-activation potentiation or just potentiation of doing a really high intensity contraction in a similar muscle group, and how that would then perform on a kind of a really general task like a bike sprint. And it was a complete failure, so it didn't work at all. And and I spent 6 months working on it and getting everything right. But I learned a lot about the process of science and just basically what you thought was going to be true and what was true was, but it didn't turn out that way, which is a great way because it's very true in everything else, right? You might think you're on the right path and it makes so much sense logically, but in practice it doesn't work. And that kind of idea has never left me.
And do you apply a lot of that, I'd say, that scientific method to your athletes today?
Like that specifically, yeah, maybe in certain times, but definitely the idea of like obviously using knowledge and established knowledge, you want to call that science. Yeah, absolutely. Like that has to be part of a successful program. And not that it has to be part of a successful program. A successful program has that. So you can't really avoid that stuff.
And what kind of athletes are you working with today primarily? Is it garden variety? Are they high level? Give us a good idea there.
So for me personally, which is different than the other coaches we have at our business, about 2/3 of my clients are people that are focused on CrossFit. And about 1/4 of those of my clients are people that want to compete at the regionals, the CrossFit regionals in whatever region they're in, or they want to aspire to make it to that level, or they want to do well at that level. And about 10% of my clients want to specifically compete at the CrossFit Games.
Okay, and now, we've had a lot of CrossFit Games athletes, either people who have gone as individuals or individuals or as a team. So we've had those people on the podcast, people we've interviewed and whatnot. And cool. So I've gotten a good idea of maybe what it takes, the daily grind, the mental fortitude. So I think what would be really cool to do with you is to kind of talk about the programming a little bit, and your thoughts, because I have not programmed for any CrossFit Games athletes, and so one of my big questions I think would be, or people who want to be super competitive there, one of my big questions would be, how different does individualized programming get for? Maybe you could even. Because I don't want to get too generic, because you have the experience, you have 2 different athletes who are going to go, but like, how different is the individualized program for athlete X versus athlete Y who wants to pursue a competitive CrossFit career? So I would say on a broad scope, just a very general statement, people that want to go to and there's different levels of that too, right? I've had clients where they go, okay, I want to go back to the games, but my goal is to do well at the games. Their goal isn't just to get there. I have other clients where their goal is to get back to the games. Like that's their main goal. And they know that if they get there, that's great. And let's do the best we can. But their number one goal is to get there. And those are different types of people as well. There's no commonality really, because like just looking at the way the sport is, there's so many different types of people that can make it to the games, which is, that's actually very exciting. But I would say that the issues or the limitations or the focus that these people have is generally it's generally more specific in one, like these certain little areas that you wouldn't need to focus on maybe quite as much with people at like the open level. Sure, they would still have that issue, but they have a whole bunch of other things that they need to really work on as well. Whereas these types of people, they have kind of these smaller areas of focus that are required, while you still maintain everything else. But they have these certain areas that are really important to them, or they really need to get better at. Okay, so the higher caliber the athlete, the more narrow the focus gets on like a specific part while trying to maintain everything else.
I'd say that's a pretty fair statement. Yeah, I would say it's a pretty fair statement. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I would say it's, from my experience, it's pretty fair. But a huge thing for people like that is, and especially clients I've had that have gone to the games before they were clients of mine, or once they go there, like. And it's different for clients I've had the whole time before they've made it to that level. And this is not to pump my tires or anything, but the clients I get have been to the games either multiple times before, and they were kind of doing what they wanted before that. They have much more injuries. Like their level of their injuries or setbacks over the years are much greater. And I'm not sure if it's just because they pushed themselves maybe a bit too hard on their own, and they didn't kind of dial it back or whatnot, but that's a really big concern, is to make sure you can have a really good training year for these people that want to and need to perform for really only one weekend, in like either in May or early June for people at the regionals, because that's when that one weekend of competition occurs. So it's very important to make sure that they have a good training year, and whatever that means for them, so that they can be set up well and prepared and confident for that one weekend. They don't need to be ready to qualify for the games in November. But sometimes it's hard for people to understand that, because they'll feel different in the off-season training if they're not used to what off-season training is.
And is that where you're doing most of your, injury proofing or doing your best to reduce the chance of injury, is during like an off-season period?
Yeah, well, I would say that type of stuff, like whatever you want to call that, like fixing movement patterns, or just kind of just adding more capacity to certain types of movements, or just based on their injury history or whatever, like trying to make sure we're working towards that, or that type of, or that idea of an injury or a concern is always kind of like a balloon in the air. It's always important when I'm writing their program. I always think of that. Yeah, that's, I don't know if that ever goes away though. Like that's always a hugely important thing to me, because the last thing you ever want is to push someone back towards a previous injury. That's a very bad thing to do, at any point, right? Like you can't let go of that. But the off season is just generally doesn't look like CrossFit to them, right? So, or to me, most of their training just looks a lot different from what it would look like right now, and definitely what it will look like different from what's going to come in the next 2 months as they prepare for that big competition. So I just think that difference for people that are not used to having a program that's designed specifically for them in their preparation to try to achieve their goal, it just looks different. But to me, it has to be like that. Based on my current understanding of things, it has to be toned down a little bit, because it's too easy to beat yourself up in this sport.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think, and I actually like to get your opinion on that, because I think that I think things are probably only getting more brutal, right? Like people are getting more competitive, times are getting faster, people are getting stronger, fitter, all these things, and volume is, some people can just handle the crazy volume, some people can't. And you've been in the sport for a long time. What have you seen a transition from because to be honest, to keeping an athlete healthy with some of the volume that has to go on is that's a challenge. So good on you for that. But have you seen I guess an evolution of that over the last? You said you've been doing it 8 or 9 years, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen an evolution of that in the sport?
In terms of how people train?
Yeah, and I would say how and how people train. So what was needed to get someone at a competitive level 8 years ago versus today?
Yeah. And that's a tricky question, because I don't know what the volume, I don't know if the volume needed to make someone pretty good is really that much different, and the key word being needed. But the volume kind of imposed on people is, and even from my perspective, I can look back because I track all of the training I give people. I would honestly say for people that want to compete at a regional level or a games level, I would say the amount of training volume I give them right now compared to what it would be, say back in 2011, so like 6 years ago, I would say it's almost twice as much.
Today compared to back then?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I would say it's almost twice as much on a weekly basis. But again, the way it goes, if anyone's listening, is you can do that, but you have to progressively build up to it. It's just like anything. You can't forget the principles of just progressive overload, right? You need to allow the person and their body to adapt to that amount of loading. You can't just go from training 4 times a week to training 14 times a week and expecting something really good to happen, because it's not. Something very bad is going to happen in one part of your body or another. It's just going to break down. But that being said, the way that the volume of work for these people is distributed has changed as well.
Okay, and I think that's very interesting. And I kind of, and sorry, I'm just kind of picking your brain because
no worries. I like that.
You know a ton about programming, and it's something I'm very interested in, fascinating in, and learning about. So you do a lot of. I'd say primarily individualized programming. That is that a fair statement? Like most every person you work with is
exclusively individualized programming. Yep.
Okay, great. And so you've seen a number of individual athletes over the years. Have you developed any sort of, and this would be probably personally in your own programming, any sort of framework that you see? And it doesn't have to be super detailed. I'm just wondering, you're starting with someone kind of new. Is there like what we need? Is there, a certain test that helps you find a weakness, or, a certain spot you start people to try and start finding? Because like you talked about the higher caliber of the athlete, the narrow focus it may need to be. How do you go about like finding that weakness and then addressing them over time? And is there any sort of general framework that you've used to find that?
Yeah. So great question. There's with like, in the way I would approach it is no different than I would approach the philosophy or the idea is there's no different than how I would approach coaching someone who's brand new to fitness. You have to assess the individual as the individual. You have to watch what they do. You have to get information from them. Obviously, for a beginner, the information you're going to want to get from them is a lot different than the information you're going to want to get from someone who's competing at the CrossFit Games, right? But it doesn't change the fact that you still need to obtain information and valuable information from them in order to then design an effective training program for them. And whether that is like what's your injury history? Let me see you do these movements. I want to see like the range of motion amount around your shoulder, through your spine, your hip, what your ankles do. And then specifically for people that are at the upper echelon, of course, yeah, there's a definite framework. We want to know lots of stuff. Like we want to know what their deadlift, squatting, snatching, clean and jerking, all that stuff is, because then we have comparative ratios, and we kind of use as an idea to see where people are and see kind of where they sit on those, and when we compare those lifts to one another. So that's max effort type of barbell lifting, and we do that specific for the upper body as well. And then we have certain gymnastic style tests we would have people do, which are specific to CrossFit. In terms of toes to bar, chest to bar, muscle ups and whatnot. And then we break that down a lot further. So with toes to bar, we want to know and start integrating more core tests with that as well. So in terms of like just an example, so okay, you can do X amount of toes to bar. You can do this other toes to bar test. Okay, how long can you hold an L sit hanging from a pull-up bar, just as a simple test of hip flexion? I was laying on their back and do an active straight leg raise. So they're laying on their back on the ground and they raise their legs up, or they raise one leg up right as far as you can get it. And they pass that test. So it's like, it looks pretty good. They have good active range of motion through their hamstring and their hip or their glute or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. That motion, they have good active range of motion. That's good. If they can't do that, if they're very poor at that test and they can't get their leg while it's straight up far enough, or they can't create enough of an angle on it, then they're gonna be very bad at L sits, and that might actually be the problem as to why they're not good at toes to bar. So it might not be a toes to bar like technical problem. It might be an actual structural issue that they need to work on. But we wouldn't get to that just by looking at what their toes to bar AMRAP is. You kind of break it down. And we would do that with all all really specific things, or all the movements. We would just look at it basically at the top level. What's your performance? What is the capacity with these types of things? And then we break it down and go, okay, what could be going on here? So for another simple example, like we have someone do like a 1 to 12 chest to bar ladder. That's a very common test we do for people at this level. And some people may come back and go, you know what? The problem was I couldn't hang on to the bar. Like my grip just gave out. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting. And we'll watch the video, see what's going on. And we just do some grip tests on them and see what their absolute grip scores are in terms of max efforts. And like one example we use for that is like a double overhand deadlift. So no hook grip, no mixed grip, just double overhand. I want to see how much you can lift off the ground. And that's a really simple test for people to do, but it's also very enlightening for us as a coach to see what people get on that. Because you might think the chest to bar is the problem or the movement, and it's not the movement, it's their hands and their forearms and how they're gripping. And like there's so many over the years, there's so many different ways to look at it. But yes, there's definitely a framework as to how we assess people. And I would say it starts really simply with just looking at very specific movements, looking at their capabilities and their inefficiencies, and then going from there.
And how long does that assessment process last normally when you get a new athlete?
Maybe up to a month before we get all the information we need. And then it depends on what time of the year they start with us. So let's just say it's July and they didn't qualify for the games, or let's say it's like right now and they're not going to qualify for regionals, but they want to start. This is the best time for someone who's looking to have a coach help them towards like in CrossFit. This is the best time for them to start, is because their important competition for those people is not going to happen until next February, with that being the CrossFit Open. So if they started right now, the assessment process would look kind of as full-fledged as possible, because we have lots of time. But we also do have some people that decide to start with us, and that's totally fine. It's up to them. They want to hire us like right now, and they're going to regionals in 2 months. So that's really not an optimal scenario. Right. And then obviously we can't spend 1 month going through an assessment with them. We have to like take the biggest and most important things and look at those right now, because we don't have time to go through everything. But the really most important things would go back to their movement and how well they move, and just going through their injury history, their training history, their current training volume. And then so we can kind of just start them off and kind of like not skip a beat because of the timeline being so short.
That makes sense. So I'm gonna ask you a completely different programming question here.
Sure.
I'm sure you've heard of the 5 mile, 5-minute mile, 500-pound back squat Gauntlet challenge, right? From Dave Castro. If an individual, and I'm asking for personal reasons, if an individual wanted to achieve only those two things, they didn't care about anything else, what would your recommendation be?
Well, I would recommend, obviously you first start with again, just going back to the basics, as you do an assessment on the person and see what they're doing. But then you also have to look at it on a realistic level. So for someone like me, the best suggestion would be you might want to find another goal, because you're never going to back squat 500 pounds. It's like pick something else. But no, like there's lots of stuff. You need to assess where they're at, and then based on there, you go from there. So if someone's current best mile time is like 5:05, then you go, all right, well, that's pretty good. We can kind of see what that is. If their best back squat at the time is 4:05, then you go, okay, well, you're 95 pounds away, and those 95 pounds are going to take a lot longer to add than taking 5 seconds off it's going to take a lot longer to add that back squat load. I would assume it's going to take a lot longer. Or vice versa, right? You have someone whose current back squat is 550 pounds and their mile time is 7 minutes. That person, you might just tell them, it's like, unless you lose like 50 pounds, there's probably not a chance that's going to happen. Right. That you're going to ever be able to run 5 minutes. Or it could be a very basic thing. It's like, do you ever run? No, I've never run before. All right, well, let's just start really basic, and you need to learn how to run, and you need to develop running capacity and running volume. And then we can do an actual test and see what your best 1 mile time is and get an assessment of where you are. But you just have to look at it as to where the person's starting. And then like you have to think about how much work and how much training is going to have to go in, and just generally how much that person is going to have to adapt to get to those numbers. And then you'd figure it out from there, depending on where they're at.
Okay. And the reason I ask is it's a goal I've been flirting with for a little while now. It's, because without training for that, just doing the programming that I have been doing, I've been able to achieve a 5:13 mile and a 450-pound back squat. Now, that's really, in my opinion, not close in either regard, because I know how hard it would be to get my mile time to 5 or below, and to add 50 pounds to my back squat seems like crazy. But, other people look at it and they're like, oh, you're close. I'm like, that's like, I don't know, that's a couple years of training, in my opinion. Like, so I'm just curious. I don't ever like to commit to a goal if I don't think that I'll actually achieve it. So I've really been like thinking about this one for the last several months, if it's something that I really want to go after. So anytime I have a world-class coach on, then I just have to ask them the question if, what they think the training should look like and how possible it actually would be, and things like that.
Yeah. And there's, and you know yourself well, like, do you feel like you have to run a lot to get better at running, or do you feel like you have to do certain things to get better at running?
Well, see, to be honest, and this goes to my capacity, like for the mile specifically, I don't have to do a ton of running to get better at it. Maybe some interval training or whatnot. I always can maintain that fast mile. But then you get into let's just bump that up to 1.5 mile, and my performance falls off dramatically. But I a little bit more power based, perhaps, able to handle that short time frame on the mile, and I can obviously squat a decent amount. So I don't know if the answer to that would be a lot more aerobic work to try and get that down, but then how much would that sacrifice on my back squat? But I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I do appreciate you answering that question, but I don't want to bore all the listeners with me trying to chase my own goals here. But I do appreciate you you answering that, man. But I am going to completely shift gears on you now. So we have what we call the book question on the podcast. It really helps me, maybe learn a little bit more about you and what's really important to you kind of making an impact. So, and this could be Canada and America, whatever you want to. So in Canada, it's the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
That's it.
Okay. So the Prime Minister calls you up, and he says that you're going to be responsible for a chapter of this new book that they're releasing. It's going to go into all schools in Canada, elementary, middle school type stuff. And every single child in Canada is going to have to read your chapter, and they're going to have to be tested on and passed before they can pursue any further education past high school. What would your chapter be about, given that gravity of the situation?
It's quite the thing. It's just basically, from my perspective. And are you asking in terms of like, how do you end up having the best kids?
Just really whatever
what's a good lesson for these people?
Yeah, maybe. And to be honest, I lived in Canada for a year or two when I was younger, but like maybe there's just something that you feel like is missing. Maybe you think that's something that people more, because you're basically, if you got to decide this chapter, you're influencing your entire nation, right?
Yeah.
So you get to decide, you get to have a little bit of your finger in the pie as far as developing the next generation. So what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything missing in Canada. I think everything's here. I just think that you might need to just kind of highlight certain things a little more for people so that they don't forget, right? I'm sure that's no different than many other countries, right? Like, so a country like Canada is one of the best countries in the world, if not the best country to live in. So just being like, people need to be grateful that they live in such a great country, like in every respect. They need to be grateful for that and realize that, okay, so wow, someone cut me off my way to work today. God, my day sucks. It's like, no, you need to remember that you live where you live and the amount of gratitude you should have for the life that's been handed to you. And that being said, as well, that driver that cut you off, you also need to respect them and respect that what they're doing in their life and the choices people have to make on a daily basis. And you need to respect other people as being individuals and being free will individuals.
I love that, man. So a little perspective shift for people.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think anything's missing. I just think it needs to be highlighted again.
That's really awesome. I think that's a very unique answer that we haven't gotten on the show before. That I think it's awesome. Really, really cool.
Good.
Cool, man. So I'm going to go back to training a little bit more.
Yeah.
So the CrossFit Open is just about over here in 2017. How did you feel about, let's just say, the open workouts this year?
Well, it's different, right? Like, so there's a whole bunch of perspectives from it. Usually every year I used to write these. I'd write these reviews of the open workouts, what I thought of them and whatnot. But I don't know why I didn't this year. I just wasn't excited to do it, so I didn't do it. And because it takes me a lot of time, because I like to put a lot of effort into it. So I'll be giving you like a kind of a brief overview of what I think. So I don't know. It's just different, right? Like every year, people like to compare how they did in the Open in 2015 versus how they did in 2016, and then versus how they're doing in 2017. And they think that, that the Open's a really great assessment of their fitness, and it just isn't. So that's the first thing you have to understand, is that the Open is not a great assessment of your fitness, and you have to understand that ahead of time. Because it can't be. It can't assess things but they're doing a pretty damn good job of it, given the format they have. Sure, it could be better, and we could argue lots about how to change that, but there was 400,000 people that registered this year to sign up to do a fitness test, so that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Either way, right? No matter how you slice it, that's awesome, and CrossFit's obviously done a fantastic job in getting it to that point. But for the people that really care about the Open and really want to go to the next level, there's a lot to this, right? There's answers about like what I think of the 20s of the Open and the events, but then there's the philosophy behind the Open, being that the athletes that put a lot into this and put a lot of their time and effort and money into trying to compete in a sport that's unknown and random. The organizers, they kind of leave these people out to dry when they put random crap into these events. So for example, they thought it was a great idea to have one dumbbell in the first event. It's like, okay, fine. And that was like, so then the next event, it made sense with the numbers. It's the second event. So now we're going to have 2 dumbbells for whatever reason. That's not a good enough answer for me, like to when you're trying to decide who moves on to the next stage of competition. Because in reality, the Open is there for these people to select who goes to the next stage of competition, that being the regionals. And to me, you don't select, you're not selecting the best people based on being like cute with how you do stuff. So that's kind of that's an issue with the Open, and it's going to I think it'll become a bigger issue as you go along, where you have people that are putting more and more time and effort into this, and companies that sponsor certain individuals that put time and effort into this, and only to have maybe one type of, like, these certain types of events come up and you go, okay, well, I'm done now. I can't do this. I'm out for this year. I guess we got to go next year. And a simple example of that is what happened, or what almost happened in 2012, was when they did the first event was 7 minutes of burpees to 6 inches overhead. That was the first event.
Yeah.
If you did that right now, well, luckily I hope they don't do that event right now, because that will remove certain people from making it to the next stage immediately. They're done. They're already out. So because you thought that was a really cool thing to do, you potentially screwed over some of your best people from making it to the next stage. And that's only if, though, that only matters if you want the next stage of competition to be the best people in the sport. That's all that matters. If you don't care who gets there, then that's fine. That's a totally different discussion. But if you want the fittest people for what you're testing, or what you want to be testing at that next level, that being the regionals, you have to test appropriately at the previous stage, that being the open. So I hope that as time goes along, the open kind of segregates itself, and that people that just want to do the open, like the community aspect of it, like there's part one of the open, sure, and then there's a section of the open for people that want to go on to the next stage, and the tests are different. And I hope that happens soon, because it's not that they aren't selecting the best people. I just think that you could be selecting more of the best people that you want to see at the next level of competition.
Okay, and so are you saying that the workouts right now, I mean, are you saying that they aren't geared towards actually finding the fittest person right now?
I think they are, but
okay.
And it's like anyone would be, right? Like, I just think that they're not designed for the best people. That's what I mean. Like, they're designed for everyone to do.
Oh, I got you.
Right?
Yep.
They're designed to be inclusive and all that.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that I think you need to design events that are more exclusive.
That makes sense.
But that goes against kind of the philosophy of the open. And also their argument could easily be, right, that the best of the best in the sport will make it through no matter what. It's like, okay, that's fine, but what about the other people? Like, what about the other people that aren't in that boat, that maybe they're 6'3", and if you put that burpee event in, they can't compete in regionals anymore, versus you switch it around and you make the first event rowing, then the 4'10" or 5'1" person can't compete anymore. So, like, your actions have consequences. So as long as they're okay with that, then there's no argument from me that you can't put up, because they're the ones that run the show. But I'm just saying that as a very outsider view, and just being critical of something I really love, is I hope things change in the future where the open events become more exclusive. But you'd have to organize the way that people register for all this differently. Anyway, that was a little too long on that, but
no, I find that very interesting, because when I first found CrossFit or got into it, it was 2009, and it was right before the CrossFit Games in 2009, and Miko Salo, he won 2009, Kalipa 2008, James in 2007, right?
Yeah.
And that's when I picked up in 2009, and I was like, this is like, I thought from that point forward, I was like, what's going to be so cool about CrossFit is, like, the same person will probably never win it more than once, and I really thought that was going to be true. And now that's not seeming to be true. I mean, whatever, Rich Froning won it. He went 4 times, and and I've kind of lost track now. Is Fraser,
Annie Thorisdottir won it twice.
Yeah, and the other
and
daughter,
Katrin Davis-Daughter has won it twice.
Yeah.
And Matt Fraser finished second, first.
Yeah, that's right. He's
and the girls, like the scoreboard for 2015 was Katrin Davis-Daughter, and then it was Tia Claire Toomey, and then it was Sarah Sigmund's daughter, and it was the exact same scoreboard this year.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
So yeah, I take a look at that, and what do you think the future is? Do you think that we will only have more of these dominant, and I know I'm asking you to wave a magic wand here, but you just have so much experience. Do you think that these dominant athletes will just become more dominant? Like, this is what will happen. The people who can be more serious, who have more sponsors and more money, like, they will be the people who win 5 years in a row? Or do you think it will ever get to that, like, these tests are so varied that really it could be luck of the draw, depending on what events show up, and maybe someone different every year?
Well, yeah, I think for those people that are just right for the sport, like Rich was right for the sport. So it's not that it didn't matter what came up for Rich, but it almost didn't, because he was just so much better than everyone, and it almost didn't matter what came up. And then same with Matt, right? Like, Matt Fraser is that type of person where it almost doesn't matter what comes up, and that's who you want to win, because he is the best person. And same with Rich, he was the best person. But yeah, there's I would say like amongst those people, what you're going to see, hopefully what you're going to see is kind of what you've been seeing for the last few years, is just that the field of people that could win is getting bigger. So there's just more people that could win the games each year, which is great. That's exciting. Versus like 2000, kind of in my opinion, in 2011 and 2012 and even 2013, there was one male that could win the CrossFit Games, and only one male. There was no one else that was going to beat him. And that changed in 2014, and since then it's just different. And it's different on the women's side, in my opinion. Like the women, it seems like there's much more depth in who could win on the women's side right now. So I just think that'll continue. I hope it continues. I hope it in like 2020 that there's legitimately 10 women and 10 men who are going to finish, or who have the chance to finish first. And when it gets to that situation, I think it then comes down to the way the events are designed. Because if you have people that are very much along the same lines, yeah, like the way they're designed are going to affect things. But then it's like any sport, right? You have to show up and you have to perform and you have to do it. And if you don't perform to your abilities, or some things don't go your way, which happens in every sport, you're not going to win. So that's just kind of the way it is. But the way I look at it in terms of like the open perspective or the regional of the games is, you want to try to do the best you can to kind of remove all the extra variables.
Yeah, and I think, I'm interested. I'm very excited to actually see the sport. I would like for it to get to more, like 10 or 20 guys. It's like they're all just trading point for point, all the way up until the end. That would be really cool. And I want to ask your opinion on one thing, since we were just talking about Rich Froning a little bit. I won't discredit anything that Rich has going on, from genetics to mental toughness to just a ridiculous drive to succeed. But part of me feels like he just figured out competitive CrossFit programming before anyone else did. Would you agree with that statement to any degree?
I think like people like that, or like people like a lot of the best athletes, and in the sport, and then a lot of the people like that even have coaches, right? One of their best qualities is they know themselves really well. Yeah, they know what they need to do deep down, and they know how it needs to be done. And then if they have someone who's coaching them, hopefully their coach knows it at that level too. And then that's a special relationship. But for someone like Rich, I would just say that Rich knew what worked for Rich, and he knew what made him be really good, and he knew what made him feel good, and he knew what wouldn't make him feel good. So like once you figure out that answer for yourself, then that's fantastic, right? Like that's obviously he figured out what he needed to do, and then he went and did it, and then he just kept doing it. And I'm sure he evolved it over the years. If you asked him, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But whatever he did was working for him. And that's what he should have just did. He should have did what he did, because he won 4 times in a row. And I'm not sure how else you could have done that. So you got to give him credit, right? Because he obviously went out and did it, and he did it on his own. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, I just find it very impressive. Because when people start, I just feel like it was kind of the Wild West when things first started in competitive CrossFit programming. I think that, in the, specifically coming from more of a data-driven programming stance, like yourself, you could kind of objectively look at like, okay, what would it take to build this elite human being? But I think everyone else was kind of like just throwing everything together and seeing what would happen, and that's something I liked about what Greg Glassman said. I think it was in the 2009 games that. And they kind of dropped this now, and I wish that they wouldn't have. I don't ever hear them say stuff like this anymore, that really it's not it is a CrossFit competition, but he said it's a competition of training methodologies. He said that in 2009, and that's something I've always found, because now you just have to be training like a competitive CrossFit fitter to win. But back then he was kind of saying like, we don't care what you're doing, come here, test it, we'll see who wins. But now if you're a triathlete, there's no way in hell you're going to get there without having trained CrossFit specifically. So now I've gone on my long-winded a rant or tangent, which I apologize for, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to jump to the quick-fire questions of the show. So quick questions, quick answers. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, man. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
I would say probably a 1K row time trial.
Okay. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
One activity, I don't know. I'd say just the general idea of making sure if that's what you want to do or your sport requires, make sure when you're doing it, you're accepting of what's happening and you understand that it needs to happen and it's supposed to be uncomfortable.
All right. And if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Running shoes.
Awesome. All right, man. And here's the question of the show. What is your best advice you have for becoming a better human? And this is 100% open-ended.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to have to give you this exact same answer that I gave you for that chapter of the book thing, because that's kind of what I thought you were asking about, because that's what I was trying to answer the question as, like, how do you have people become better humans? Mm-hmm. That's a gigantic question. Yeah, I don't know.
So perspective shift.
Yeah, for like very basically, like I said, you have to be grateful for the things you have in life and all the, to use the word blessings, but you have to be grateful for the blessings you have, because there's a lot of people that would probably be very envious of where you are in the world. Being that if you live in Canada, you automatically struck gold just by being born in Canada. And there's a lot of things where, like, you just need to be respectful of other people, their time, be respectful that they are free will individuals, that they're going to make decisions and you're going to make decisions. And then, like for myself, I'm very grateful for having such good parents. And I think that's a gigantic part of having a good society is being blessed with having really good parents.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate that answer. Now, if the listeners, wanted to learn more about you or what you're doing, where could they find out and learn more about you?
Our website, optimumperformancecalgary.com. We have all of our information related to our services and whatnot there, or Facebook or Instagram. Just search Optimum Performance Training. We have a little Canadian flag as our symbol, so easy to find, and we try to post some information and educational material on there from time to time, just to when we have something we feel is valuable to offer. And that'd be the best places to reach us, and we're more than happy to answer any questions people may have.
Perfect, man. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time today, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.